All right, Aleph Kali from Cult Strange, Alter Defay, and Chrome, as well as a couple other things here and there that we may or may not know about
A
and may
couple
or
other
may
things.
not play in together. Welcome to New Music Mondays.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me to do this.
So nice to see you. So, congratulations on the EP from your new band, Cult Strange, which came
Thank
out
you.
earlier this year. It's available on Bandcamp. We'll provide our viewers with the link to that. Um, Really great album.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's and Alter Defay, your other long time, very long time band.
All long-term bands at this point. They're
Yeah.
all 20 plus, 30 plus, and 35 plus years now. The bands that
Well, let's get
know
into
what
that.
they're
So, well, first of all, the album from Alter Defay came out around this time last year, so
last year.
definitely
Yeah,
not old news. And I will provide the link to that. It's called "The Insatiable Desire for More."
tis.
And it's very good. So the bassist Buzz and the guitarist Rodney from Cult Strange, you know, way back with those guys.
Yes. Rodney and I started playing together in 1989 when he joined one of the dumb punk bands that I was playing in. Our We'd booked a tour, and our original bassist dropped out with about a month prior to us leaving on tour. We found Rodney, taught him all the songs, and just hopped in a van. And that's kind of how he and I got to know each other to begin with. And like I said, it was sort of a punk rock band. There was nothing real. Um, it was just dumb punk rock band. So he can play dumb punk rock. I can play dumb punk rock. And we had a couple of days off in Texas. One of the shows had been canceled, and he kind of pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, my friend Buzz and I have this other project that we're working on. We just lost our drummer, and I'm wondering if you might be interested in giving it a listen." I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And he's like, "Oh, the influences, instead of being Bad Religion in the punk rock band, were Killing Joke and Chrome, uh, stuff like that." And I was like, "Yeah, of course, those are some of my favorite bands." He played the demos that he had. He and Buzz had been together prior to this and used a drum machine for a lot of stuff, and then found a drummer that they had played with for a while, and then I believe he may have mysteriously disappeared, but I'm not entirely sure that that's the case. But I got tapped for that, and that's when I started playing with the three of them back in 1989. And we've had a couple of switches where one member has dropped out or the other member has dropped out, but we've come back together, and we've been pretty much playing consistently since then, through a number of different projects. The first one, the band that I joined, was called Seed. We later changed the name to Smarter because we found out that there were several other Seeds, including one by Kevin Seconds, who had a side project. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's he's a famous guy. Then we also found out that there were two different bands down in San Jose. We're there in San Francisco, both using the name Seed, and one of them had stolen our logo and printed up stickers. Like, okay, I guess we just need to ditch the band name and eventually settle on Smarter, which is martyr with an S in front of it. So smarter than to be a martyr.
Well, those guys that stole your logo are lucky that they didn't mysteriously
There
disappear.
you go.
Right. So you've been the drummer for Chrome for a long
I'm
time.
still the drummer for
Oh,
Chrome.
still,
Watch
sorry,
it.
still the drummer. And since what, early or mid '90s, right?
1998 is when I joined. It's a very similar story. They had John and Hillary Stench, who were the original members. They were the original rhythm section, and wanted to book a tour. And then at the last minute, John, the drummer, couldn't make it, and I somehow got tapped. How did I get tapped? Buzz had stopped playing music for a while and wanted to raise a kid and be a good father. And that lasted, I think, for a few good years. And then the call of rock came back, and he decided that he needed to do music again. He answered an ad in the back of the SF Weekly, or do you remember when they had papers with ads in the back of them? It was before the internet, maybe. Answered an ad in the paper looking for a bassist, and the influences were Christian Death and 45 Grave and all of this stuff. And he was like, "Oh, I love all that stuff." He goes over to the house where the people in the band live. It turns out they're our friends Nick and Crystal from Galaxy Chamber. And he said he hung out with them and chatted with them for a bit, kind of figured that it wasn't really what he was looking for at the time. He called me up afterwards and told me what had happened. He said that he had mentioned somehow that he's been playing with this guy who was a drummer, and they were big Chrome fans. And I got a call a little while later, or he got a call back asking for my phone number because the drummer for Chrome had left, and they had the drummer and bass player for Chrome had left, and they had a tour coming up. So I called and spoke to Z Silver, who was Helios's partner at the time and a member of the Helios Creed band. And she had a bunch of questions, asked me if I was familiar with the band. I said, yes, of course. And at that point, she said there was a bass player and a drummer that they needed. She asked, I was like, can you do me a favor and give me about a month to get my chops back in order? I'm primarily a drummer, but I've been playing bass for the last 2 years in a different band that I was in with Rodney. And she says, are you a better drummer or bass player? I'm like, I'm a better drummer. And she says, do you know any bass players? I'm like, I know a bass player or two. And at the time, when Buzz and Rodney and I first started playing, Buzz was my guitarist and Rodney was my bassist. And at that point, Buzz had switched back to bass, which was his first love. And my first thought, of course, was Rodney. Rodney's my bass player. And I called Buzz back, and he's like, so what happened? I was like, oh yeah, they said they need a drummer. I'm going to go up to Guerneville, which is where they were living at the time. I'm going to go audition. I'm going to ask them to give me about a month to get my chops back. And he's like, they don't need a bass player, do they? And I said, yeah, they do. And there was just dead silence on the phone for a good 15, 20 seconds. And I was like, no way. I'm like, I know. So Buzz and I got together, rehearsed some songs. We didn't know what we were going to have to play. Chrome are not 12-step blues band. So learning that stuff was a bit tricky because they sped stuff up and slowed stuff down. And it's difficult to pick out through the chaos sometimes where the notes are. So we learned them the best we could. Went up to Helios's place in Guerneville. He was surprised that we had heard of the songs. And they were a studio band. They only played live twice the whole time they were together. There was one show in San Francisco as a warm-up to a festival in Italy they had done. So they never learned the songs. So we get up there and we're jamming with Helios in his front room while he's wearing his slippers, and he's looking at us going, are you sure that's how it play? You sure that's how the song goes? We're like, no, fuck no, we don't know. And he's like, you're the one that wrote it, So we kind of learned from each other, and it was pretty interesting to see. One of the songs he didn't want to do initially was Meet You in the Subway. And I was like, we have to do that song. It's a great song. I, as a Chrome fan, would like to hear that song if I was seeing the band. It's like, I don't know, I've got some bad memories about that song. And so we start playing it, and he's looking at it and putting his fingers and watching Buzz where he's putting his fingers. And he's kind of struggling along with it and is starting to get it. And then it's time for the lead, and he just whips into the lead, just like he'd written it. It was like, he's doing that weird thing where it sounds like seagulls right now. And that was kind of it. We rehearsed for maybe a month. Buzz and I were in San Francisco. The other people that were in the band were down in Los Angeles. Tommy Grenyas, who's still in Chrome, and a second guitarist, Nova Kane, came up with him. We got together, rehearsed twice, and then took off for the first ever Chrome tour. Was a full 30-day tour of the U.S. So that's where it all started.
Wow. And then Rodney actually filled in on bass for a little while. How did that happen?
We decided to book another tour. That one was much smaller. It was just a West Coast tour. But Helios decided he wanted a different rhythm guitarist. So Buzz switched over to guitar and was the second guitarist. And then we got Rodney in on bass. So it was the three of us and Helios and Tommy all playing. It was like, we should have done this back in the 80s. We could have been Chrome for a long time. So that was it. Rodney later joined the Helios Creed band and was the bassist there for quite a while and did a few tours as well.
I'm not sure that I knew that. Huh, that's cool.
Now you do.
Yeah. So you're the singer in Cult Strange, but I know it's not the first time that you've been a singer. Let's talk about the history of Alter de Fay, because I know for a brief period of time you were the singer. But let's go way back. San Francisco, mid '80s. Kent Cates started the band.
Early '80s, yeah. I'm actually now not the vocalist of Alter de Fay twice.
Okay.
The first time I was playing in punk bands. I had lots of big black hair at the time, wore a lot of makeup back then. We used to call it death rock back then. It's before you kids came along and started calling it goth. Um, I went to Reckless Records in San Francisco and saw that there were some ads. I went to go put up my ad, singer looking for band, right? I wanted to break out and be a vocalist for a while. And while I was there, I found an ad, and the same thing. It was like guitarist looking for a band. You know, influences are Christian Death, 45 Grave, you know, Community FK, all this stuff. And I'm like, that's totally me. So I put up my ad, pulled one of the tags off of the other ad, went back home to Hayward, where I was still living with mom because I was only 17, maybe, and got a call one weekend. Mother says, "Hey, it's for you." So I get on the phone and it's like, "Hey, I saw your ad up at Reckless and wanted to talk to you about doing some stuff in a band." And we get to chatting, and all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, "Wait a minute!" And I say, "Is this Kent?" Because we somehow forgot to give each other names at the beginning of the conversation. And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I was just getting ready to call your ad to find out what was going on with you and your band." So that's how we met. I ended up going over to his place, and all I had was a demo of bands that I drummed in. So I figured you're supposed to bring your demo, you know, so you can prove to whoever you're legit. So we go. I sing a couple of songs a cappella, or maybe sung along to a Christian Death album or something. Give him the tape. He starts listening to it, and I was like, "You're a really good drummer. We should get you on drums. I've got this other guy that called me the other day that might want to sing." And I'm like, "Fuck, okay, back to drums." So that we stayed with that band until that lineup until 1987 or 88. Kent had started the band back in, God, I want to say maybe 82, perhaps, and his had a full band. His drummer and vocalist decided that they weren't happy in San Francisco and were going to go to New York to join bands and become a little more famous than they would be if they stayed in San Francisco. So that's how there was a gap, and that's how I got the call. And yeah, stayed with that band. We recorded a demo, but that was about it. There were a handful of bands from back then that were around. It was a very small scene. A couple of them put out albums. A lot of them didn't. And then, I guess in 2011, through the miracle of Facebook, we found out that there were enough of us from back then that were in those bands that were still alive, because we had a lot of really great drugs in the 80s, and not a lot of people are still around as a result. So Kent hits me up one day and he's like, "I saw a bunch of people like from the bands back then. They're going to put together a show called Deathstock. They're going to put together a mini fest." And it's like, "We're going to put the band back together, dude." And folks were scattered all throughout the States and other countries, and we all kind of came together. And he's like, we should find out if they want Alter de Fay. And I was like, "Yeah, actually we should." A couple of years prior to that, back in 2008, I put together a Sisters of Mercy tribute band called the Reptile House, and that was my first experience singing with a band. So I've done that for a couple of years. I can program a drum machine like a motherfucker. So that's how we run the Reptile House. I sing, I record all the drum tracks onto an iPod or any keyboard tracks or extraneous noise, and just run that as our drummer while we play. I can play enough guitar and bass, and I'm explaining to Ken, it's like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's just you and I do it. I'll program the drums, I'll play the bass, put that onto the drum track, and you can play guitar and I'll sing." And he said, "Well, okay, but I haven't picked up a guitar in 15 years. So Kent also is not a basic blues scale guy at all. I have no idea where the music that ends up in this band comes from. I don't think he does either. But it's not due to playing Led Zeppelin songs when he was a kid. He has a really unique way of structuring songs and a really amazing ear for just putting those hooks in there. It's often the case that when we get done with rehearsal and he's showing us a new tune and we're kind of cobbling it together, by the time we're done and leaving the studio, we're all whistling the hook that he had just introduced to us. He just has the ability to get that stuff to stick in your head. One of the great things about that band is that half of the material that we're playing now, half of the first album and half of the second album, were songs that were 35 years old that we wrote in the original lineup. We never recorded an album, so nobody's ever heard any of them. We got up, we played Deathstock, just the two of us, and because it's a festival and there's no stage manager, festivals always go over, and we had 4 songs. That's all we had, 4 songs. We had like a month to put everything together, taught Kent how to play guitar, remembered the songs, got up, and by the time we were ready to play, we got there, and we were the only ones that were wearing makeup or nail polish or wore black or had big hair or anything. You know, people were like, hey, check out my new cowboy suit, you know, and we're playing country western now, and doing odd versions of their material, or people just had moved in the Midwest and become Midwest folks. So we were a little pissed, to be honest. It's like nobody else looks the part. You know, this is the family reunion. You know, this is how we all know each other. And it was great to see all the faces. And like, oh, a few more wrinkles here, and oh, you're still alive. I didn't think you'd still be alive out of everybody that's here because you were one of the worst. You were always hogging all the drugs. So it's time for us to do our set, and they're like, you need to cut some of your songs. I was like, we only have 4 of them. There were 2, not to say anything bad, but there was a band that was sort of thrown together at the last minute, and they got up and did 30 minutes that were 2 Stooges songs. They managed to just jam it out, each song for 15 minutes, and that's why we ended up having to drop one of the songs. So we got on stage and we were honestly a little pissed, and I think that helped add to the dynamic quality of the
Yeah.
of the show. 5 minutes after we were done, we had another drummer and a second person who came up and asked us if we needed a second guitarist. So it happened pretty quickly. We found Scott was a friend of Kent's, so we got him in the band. And when we decided that I wasn't going to sing anymore and I needed to go beat up drums, we found Jake, who was a friend of Scott's. So that's how everything came together. It's actually one of the only bands that I get to play my original drum parts in. And going back and listening to those old cassettes of rehearsal and live shows and everything, I can hear that I'm really pushing myself to my limits at that stage. And I can finally play those drum parts now. You know, 35 years later, I'm finally a competent enough drummer that I can play those parts.
I'd say that you are. I've had the honor of being in a band with you, and you're kind of a monster behind the drums. It's always a pleasure to watch you play from the audience perspective as well. So in Cult Strange, however, you're the singer, and
Yeah.
you do have a live drummer, Andre Pavarotti. Great guy, great drummer. He plays in my band, the Ink Bats, and just listening to him on that demo, I mean, that is he really shines in that demo. He's amazing. I'm curious what it's like to be primarily a drummer that is a singer in this band and working with another drummer.
I am not bossy at all when it comes to. I'm not telling him that he has to learn my drum parts verbatim, because I wouldn't want to have to learn my drum parts if I didn't know who I was. Like that's not to toot my own horn, but that, I mean, the material that Buzz and Rodney and I recorded back then as Smarter, listening to it, we were an instrumental trio. So it was, Buzz was on lead guitar and Rodney was on lead bass and I was on lead drums to make up for the fact that there was no vocalist. I think we were all cramming in a lot of notes at the time. And going back and listening to those recordings, I can't believe how many notes and how tight we are for playing all those notes together. And at one point, Buzz reminded me, he's like, you know that we used to rehearse 3 times a week back then, right? I was like, oh, okay, that would do it. And when Andre first joined, we gave him homework. He's like, do you want me to do this? I'm like, just do your parts, play your parts. I mean, as long as it's, the basic feel of the song. And there's a learning curve. There was a learning curve. Buzz and Rodney and I have been playing together for 30 years, so we all know each other very well. Um, and none of us had worked with Andre before, other than Rodney, who's also in your band, the Ink Bats. Um, and there were a couple of rehearsals where it was a little rocky. He's learning the material for the first time. They're both learning the material on different instruments than they actually played the material. So Buzz is learning all the bass parts, and Rodney's learning all the guitar parts. So there's a little bit of restructuring that's going on. So it's a little rough in the first place. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I singing in a Sisters of Mercy tribute band. I've got a deep tenor or a baritone, depending on what it is you're trying to do. It's my natural range, which I think is why I'm able to pull it off. I had an experience where I got roped into a Bowie tribute band for a minute and got to sing a couple of songs. I sang Heroes and sang China Girl. And Rodney was in the audience, had made recordings that night. I thought that I pulled it off okay. I hadn't sung for quite a while. And he's like, do you want the recordings? I'm like, yeah. So I'm listening back to them the next day. And I'm like, wow, that's the most Sisters of Mercy David Bowie songs I've ever heard. Because that's all I know how to do is sing down there in that range. And like Heroes, I can, you could be me. And I can hit all those notes, So I've been having to undo a lot of the Andrew Eldritch from my voice. And I think that I find it.
You definitely sound like your own singer in.
I've had a couple of people now tell me that. So I feel like I'm finally hearing my voice, my real voice for the first time on these recordings.
Oh yeah, you're in the clear. It sounds for sure.
Scott Brown, the bassist in Alter Defay, is the one that recorded that demo. And at one point, I'm nervous because I'm doing my vocals for the first time. And I was like, can you make me just sound like an angry David Bowie? And at some point, I was like, oh, you're Peter Murphy influenced. And I'm like, I don't have a Peter Murphy influence. But then I realized that angry David Bowie is kind of what Peter Murphy is. Yeah. So maybe there's a line where that crosses over.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of crossover with all the male baritones from the late 70s to mid 80s. We're in the middle of a worldwide catastrophe right now that's affecting all of us in our personal lives and also in our band lives.
Yeah.
I just made that term up. Band lives. So let's talk about your band lives and your band's lives and how the pandemic is affecting Alter Defay and Cult Strange. Are you folks able to continue writing? Do you have plans for future releases? What's going on with that?
We do. I mean, with Cold Strange, we have more material. We just got the 4-song demo up, and that turned out to be good enough that we released it. We still have easily enough material for a first album. Hopefully, when all this blows over and we're all friends and can get in the same room again, we can record those. Tomasz Woodruff in Poland, who does Batcave Productions, is a very sweet man and promised me that if there were more songs, if I can come up with 10 more minutes worth of material, he'll put out the Cult Strange CD, which right now it's only available digitally on Bandcamp. Alter Defay, we got together and recorded a new 4-song EP. The next day I flew up to Portland, which is where I've been since mid-March, sheltering in place with my girlfriend. The day I landed was the day that Portland went into lockdown. So I've been in Portland for the last 5 months. As it is right now, we haven't really done much with mixing, just because none of us are supposed to be in the same room with each other, and I'm a few miles apart. So that doesn't mean that I haven't leaked a few of the rough mixes to a couple of DJs that DJ Ms. Margot might have access to, an unreleased track or four from the new EP, and that gets fairly regular airplay.
Yeah,
So
you holding out on me, Aleph?
I'm not yet. I didn't think about this until later. Maybe I can slip you a couple of tracks before this airs, if you're interested.
Now we're talking.
Yes.
Hey, before we sign off, have I told you my Tomas Woodruff / Alter Defay story?
No.
Went to Return to the Batcave Festival in Wrocław, Poland in October of 2016. Man, I can't remember all the bands that played, but it was She Passed Away and Twisted Nerve and some bands from the States as well.
Yes is right.
Leadership Hostile and it's just a great festival. All Your Sisters played. Really amazing horror Valkyrie from Italy. And anyway, so we get there on the first day, and at the front desk where you check in and show them your tickets and everything, they had a case of cassette tapes for sale. And I was looking through them, and there's all these like legendary old like death rock bands and goth bands and stuff. And there's an Alter Defay tape.
Yes.
Oh, I know those guys. And the guy behind the desk was like, "What? No way, you do?" And he went and got Tomas, and he was like, "These guys know." I'm not going to try to do a Polish accent. These guys know Alter Defay. I was like, "Oh yeah, we share rehearsal space with them. They're great guys. They're old friends," and they freaked out. It was so much fun. I was really proud to know you guys in that moment.
It was really odd because we'd played at that festival the year before, and there's a whole new crowd of people. Alter Defay didn't put out an album, so we're finally 30 years in the making is what I tell people. So these people are getting to hear this material for the first time. And we had these kids come up to Kent and I saying things like, "We've been listening to your music for years." I'm like, technically the album has been out for 3 years. So yes, you are correct. You have been listening to our album, or you've been listening to our music for years. At that, and coupled with, we never thought we'd ever get a chance to see you. So that was a little odd. It's like, I never got to see the Doors, but just having that same sort of emphasis put on, it's like, the band's only been back together for a few years. So I was super stoked to know that, yeah, that the music has made it outside of Bandcamp, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Outside of Oakland.
Outside the Bay Area, exactly. I've been reading articles written by people around the world of the death rock and goth scene in the Bay Area. And it's always fun to like see your bands, your friends' bands mentioned in these like articles in these kind of glowing, ways or whatever. Anyway,
Yes.
we're looking forward to the new material, and we'll provide the links for our viewers to the Alter Defay album that came out last year and the Cult Strange EP demo that came out earlier this year. Congratulations on both of those things, and thank you so much for joining us on New Music Mondays.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
All right, Aleph Kali, take care. Great to see you.
Hi everyone, hope you liked that video. If so, please like and subscribe to receive notifications when we upload more content. New Music Mondays is a live stream show every Monday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on twitch.tv/DavyBonesOakland. It features myself and a weekly guest DJ spinning new releases in the world of dark music, post-punk, goth, dark wave, as well as interviews with the people that make the music happen. So it's a lot of fun. Make sure to join us live. Again, that's every Monday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., or actually about 9:30 Pacific time. The audio will always be uploaded the next day to my Mixcloud page, mixcloud.com/DavyBonesOakland. And thanks for watching the video on YouTube. The interviews will all be uploaded to the YouTube channel, as well as an occasional kind of behind the scenes video as well. All right. Thanks again.